everyone, and welcome back to the Mentoring Place. We're so excited that you're here, and we've got a great topic, another great topic, I should say, the hour of power. And we've got a special guest today, and her name is Lisa Tyson. So I'm going to introduce Lisa first, and then talk about this topic. So Lisa's coming to us with extensive experience as an HR exec, C-suite, with some major firms, companies. So she definitely has real world experience at all levels through organizations. She is also a performance coach right now and working with us at the Mentoring Place, which I'm just delighted about. So today's topic, and Lisa brings her specialty here, is around personalities. Now, we all know why this is so important, not just in work, but life. Because we know that with personalities, it's about how we get along, how we collaborate together, how we make sense of interactions. And we know in the workplace, our ability to understand and connect with different personality types is absolutely critical to our success. To be able to read a situation, to be able to know what to do next. Now, there are many tools that need to be in your toolbox. The understanding of personalities is one of them. And that's why the Mentoring Place, let's face it, it's a cool place to be because it's about adding more tools in the toolbox. And the people that are teaching you these tools are the best that are out there. So speaking about the best, I'm going to bring on now Lisa Tyson, who's going to go through information about personalities and energies that go along with those personality traits and how they show up when it's good and how they show up during times of challenge. And I know that each of you will find yourself, as I have, in these words. So Lisa, a big, big welcome.
Hi, thanks, Denise. Hi, everybody. Really glad to be here. I think one of the neat things to think about with understanding personality styles, as Denise mentioned, we need to have our toolbox. And this is one of those areas that's a soft skill. And so regardless of how far we've come with technology and where we're going to go with technology, we're still going to have to deal with people and we're still going to have to deal with each other. So this is really a neat topic for me to be able to talk about and just really increase our understanding of those personality styles. So I'd like to share some slides with you so we can start talking about this content. So with personality styles, what we essentially want to do is get better insights so that we can help understand ourselves clearer and also understand others that we work with. And as Denise mentioned, even others that are outside of our work life too. There's a lot of behavioral research that exists today that suggests that the most effective people are really those that understand themselves. And the more effective we can be, the better our communication and the better our influence is going to be with others. I'd like to point out that the personality styles are really about observable behavior. So there isn't a right way, there isn't a wrong way. They're just observable behaviors that have really existed for quite a long period in history. There's evidence that goes back to BC of where people actually were characterizing and observing each other's behaviors and starting to track it and learn about it. What's also key here is with observable behavior, we all don't need to be psychologists. We're glad that we have psychologists out there because they help to get into deeper content and deeper information. But for you and I, this is information that will just help us learn more about ourselves and again, learn about other people, so that we can start to recognize what is that primary style that someone shows up in, and then how do we need to adapt ourselves accordingly. So this isn't to suggest that we need to change ourselves, that we need to do something completely different. It's really about increasing our awareness and how effective we can be as communicators. A lot of the tools that exist today, there's a lot out there for different assessments. There's DISC, there's insights from Discovery, there's TTI tools and materials, and a lot of this really comes from some of the fundamental work that Dr. Young did, a psychologist, who really focused on the discovery or the identification of the 4 personality types. He also was the contributor to really categorizing what we hear of when we talk about extroverts and introverts. So there is foundational work out there. Depending on the actual company or tool that you may be using, you might see a slight variation, but essentially it's all coming from this basic 4 types of personalities. And what we'll talk about today is really just some of those general characteristics for the 4 types. It's not an exhaustive list, but it's just to give us some exposure and to start to think about what are some things that we can tell about each other. It's also important to keep in mind that there isn't one desirable type. So there isn't one type that you want to be, there isn't one type that you should strive for. It's really important to recognize that we actually operate using pretty much all aspects of all 4 personalities. It's rare for an individual to be just one type of personality. So different situations, different things can call out different types of our personalities. We'll have a primary style, but it's really important to recognize that there isn't one style to go off of. So let's get into some more of the information. As I indicated, some of these general characteristics can really help you to determine what are some of the styles that hopefully you know of yourself or you'll learn about yourself, but then also what other characteristics do other people have that you interact with, and where do they get their energy from? So we have preferences and we have things that kind of make up that primary style, but it also helps to dive into and explain where do we get some of our energy. So what I'd like to do is actually work with you to go through each of these 4 different types or styles, if you will. We're going to start up in the top right-hand corner with the red. And I am going to refer to these as colors and blocks, but it's not intended to be labels by any means. It's really just for us to get a sense of what are some of those characteristics. So in the first box, the red, this is the type of individual that's really looking for results. Usually they're going to be an extroverted. They're going to be task-oriented. You'll probably see them come across as being competitive, strong-willed, and most likely their communication is going to be very direct. At times they may be demanding because they're really striving for that goal orientation, those results. And you can also see that they can be innovative as well. What the red is looking for, what they want, is to have big dreams. They want to have freedom so that they're not micromanaged or they're not under tight supervision. And they want to have non-routine work. Now, the red can be really valuable when you think about it from a team perspective. So you can see, some of the characteristics here are also desirable. So if you have a red on your team, you can probably count on them to be a self-starter. They can be forward-looking. They can really challenge the status quo. A couple of famous people that are characterized as the red, if you will, are Barbara Walters and Madonna. And Denise, I just wanted to pause here for a minute. From your experience, from some individuals that you worked with in the past, are there any reds or any characteristics that stand out to you?
Absolutely. And thanks, Lisa. I think, many of us work with our reds ourselves in terms of, those personality traits, or work with people that, some people may say, they're great at getting things done. They're super at like leading the charge, may also be thought of as drivers. We may say someone's in driver mode to really characterize that type of trait and that type of energy that they bring. But in a corporate setting, we'll definitely see that red energy at work that's about like, let's get it done. But we'll talk about, and Lisa will talk about why we need all the other traits and energies as well.
Okay, great, thank you. So let's move down into the bottom right-hand corner where we're going to go into the yellow zone. And the yellows are really looking for interaction, so they want to be around other people. Similar to the reds, they're usually an extrovert, and they are very people-oriented. So they may come across as also being very persuasive, that enthusiastic, that inspiring, optimistic person. What the yellow wants is also freedom. They want to have multi-changing work, so they want to have something that's dynamic, and they really want to have that people interaction. They can always also be a huge asset to a team because they're going to be that person who really motivates the other people, and they're really going to be a team player. A couple of famous people that are noted here for the yellow are Angelina Jolie and Taylor Swift. And moving in,
that's great. Those are great examples. You could see Taylor Swift and then Angelina Jolie. You could see, like, I know her, right? You know, I mean, I haven't talked to her in a few months, but right, but that thing of her falling into that category is really interesting. Yeah.
Mhm, mhm. And then we're going to move into the bottom left-hand corner into the green. And so the green is really looking for stability. So they can handle change, but their preference is really to have stability. They are more of the introvert type, although very similar to the yellow, they're people oriented. So they like to be around other people. They can come across as caring, patient, friendly individuals. They can also be very encouraging, and they can be dependable. So they have that loyalty and someone that you can count on. What they want is that predictability, and they want to have that personal interaction. They can be very valuable to a team as well, because they can really be counted on to finish the task, and they can be a hard worker for a cause that they believe in. A couple of famous people that stand out and are noted for being the greens are Carrie Underwood and Gandhi. And Denise, I'm not sure if you've talked to Carrie Underwood lately, but
Well, it's been a few weeks, but the that's great. You know, what's as you're describing that, it's so uh, as I reflect on different meetings and seeing people in meetings. So the green, the person that has the characteristics in the green, they're often very reflective, and they're really intent on listening. While the yellow, sometimes we'll say, will be think talking. And you know what? We're formulating our opinions while we're talking out loud. And the red's like, get to the point. So, what does the blue do?
so the blue is also going to be reflecting and processing, but they're really interested in the facts. So they want the hard data, they want the research, they want the information. Similar to the green, they're also going to be introverted. And then similar to the red, they're going to be that task-focused, oriented person. A lot of times they will come across as being very cautious. They may be very inquisitive, questioning a lot, analytical, detailed, precise, and they can also be very objective. What the blue looks for is quality, having standards in place. They like to have that critical thinking. They can also be very valuable to a team because they can help to make sure that the right questions are being asked, and they can be very conscientious. A famous person who is noted for being a blue is Judge Judy. And hopefully you can see some of the similarities there with kind of the structure, kind of the rules, procedures that she certainly adheres to in her role.
That's great. We were talking earlier that you could see Bill Gates, perhaps in that blue. They're very data driven, and but also you see the green, right? It's compassion and improving the world. So
Yep, no, definitely good points. And just to mention, some of the green, as I had indicated earlier, it's very rare for one person to just be one strong personality. So we'll keep continuing to talk about this, but you can see some of the characteristics that may be blue, and then you can also see some greens coming out too. So there's reference to a primary style with a secondary style or even a backup. So it isn't uncommon to see some characteristics of both or more than two. So let's talk a little bit about how the style can show up differently. And this is really around circumstances where the individual might become overextended. And what I mean by overextended is having like extreme stress or unusual stress or pressure, or being overly tired, or having a personal situation that they're managing through. So on the left-hand side of this slide, you can see the good day. And really the good day is a snapshot of the slide that we just talked about previously. So it's talking about what are some of those general characteristics. On the right-hand side, you can see what's referred to as a bad day. And this is really just to show you a visual of how some of the characteristics can be much more exaggerated, sometimes on steroids, if you will. So if you take, for example, the red, on the left-hand side, we see some of the similar characteristics we saw previously: competitive, demanding. If you look over to the right-hand side, under a bad day type situation, the red can become aggressive. They can become controlling, almost that driver and that perception that Denise had mentioned earlier. They can become overbearing at times and sometimes intolerant to deal with. If you look at the yellow on the left-hand side, we see that people-orientated, sociable, enthusiastic, persuasive person. And on the right-hand side, when they're becoming overextended, you might see them come across as being more frantic or maybe more hasty. Likewise, if we look at the green on the left-hand side, we still see that caring, patient, sharing person, relaxed. And then on the right-hand side, when they're overextended, they could become much more stubborn, docile, bland. And then lastly, when we look at the blues, we know the blues are more cautious and precise when they're in their good day. But again, overextended or under that stress or pressure, they can be coming across more cold and more reserved. So this is really just to give you an idea of certain circumstances. We all deal with variables every day and what we bring to work from our personal life as well. So it's important to keep in mind that if you have a situation where you're dealing with somebody who all of a sudden is controlling, for example, or who is aggressive, you might want to just step back and ask yourself a couple questions. First of all, find out where you are on the scheme, and maybe it's you showing up in that stressed or that overextended mode. And also ask yourself, is this typical behavior of that individual? Because they really could be exhibiting something that's a little bit more unique because of what they may be going through. The other thing to kind of point out here is how you can start to see these personality styles, how they could quickly come into a clash. So for example, if you take a red, who we know to have kind of that sense of urgency and they really want to get results and they're very goal oriented, if they are trying to deal with a green, for example, and say it is about a project or a deadline, and if they're dealing with a green who now all of a sudden has a change of plans, who has somebody coming at them that's being confrontational, that green may just really hunker down and become very stubborn. So now you have the red and the green going at each other. Now, we're not going to change somebody's DNA overnight, but this is just to show you that certain circumstances and how somebody may be overextended or having a bad day can make personality styles clash some more. Another example is if you would take a yellow, they could be approaching a blue. The yellow could be very expressive, very emotional, and they could be dealing with a blue that's overextended who's very cold and reserved. So you can also really easily anticipate that situation about how there could be some clashing there. The blue could really shut down. They could be getting annoyed, if you will, with how expressive that yellow is getting. So these are just examples of some situations where you can see almost the opposite of personalities, or certainly that overextension coming out.
And Lisa, I think it was maybe last week or the last show, we talked about how sometimes, and you could see how this would happen where, a woman will get coaching. You're too emotional. You're too, put too much, out there. And you can see that if someone's showing up with, this yellow energy, and they're excited about what they're doing, and when you could say passionate about what they're doing, really care, and they're expressing this emotion, which is a gift. Someone that has the blue tendency may not see just the incredible nature of what the person's bringing, whether it's through a debate or it's expressing an idea. And so that's that may be a challenge. Now you say, whose problem is it? Well, unfortunately, it's both, because with the blue person, demonstrating those traits, they need to be more open about styles and really listening to what's this person saying. Not so much maybe how they're saying it, but look at all this energy they're bringing. Yellow person demonstrating those yellow traits also needs to read the room, needs to read that person. Are they getting overwhelmed? And that's really the beauty of what you're sharing, is that it applies to us as individuals, it applies to us as leaders, and then us as working with others that maybe don't have, off the charts EQ. And we need to work on those, the ability to be able to read what's going on here and how do I adapt my style.
Yeah. Yep, no, great point. Because even though the yellow can be expressive, if I think about a situation, if I need to get motivated about something, or if I'm listening to a speaker, I'm probably going to be more keen to listen to somebody who has some of the yellow tendencies, who's very inspiring, very persuasive, than someone who may be blue, for example, who's going to give me a lot of data, a lot of facts. So there's good qualities in both, and there's
Absolutely.
different situations where you definitely want to pull into some of those strengths and some of those characteristics.
Absolutely. And this really, as we think about, you know, our, EQ and the ability to connect. And this really gives us some, tangible ways to look at situations and take a step back. It
Mhm.
doesn't, it's not going to provide, open up the sky and clouds to, well, we have now figured out everyone, but it sure does help. And that's why, understanding and studying, personality traits, is really worth it. I think that maybe this is one of the courses that we should have, because that ability to step back, and I think across my career, there are times, and I don't know about you, Lisa, there are times that I would say, you know what, I probably reacted too quickly. If I would have thought a little bit more where that person was coming from, and not taking it as personally, or being able to adopt a different strategy. I mean, maybe it would have been successful, maybe not, but I think it would have been worth the try for sure.
Yeah, no, no, great point. And I think, we do describe, not to pick on the Reds, but I have been starting with the Reds, and there is more of that extroverted and more of that driver type personality, and some of those traits that we see more visibly. But when you think of those types of individuals, there's really some key attributes and stuff that they can bring to an organization. One of the things for myself, I tend to be stronger in the green. And when you think about, Denise, when you were commenting on things that you've modified or reflected on throughout the course of your career, one of the things that I needed to really pause and take note on is a green can tend to be non-emotional. And some of the feedback that I was getting from individuals was probably, in situations, the calm person and the non-emotional person can be good. But then in other situations, if I was dealing with a yellow, for example, or somebody else who was a little bit more animated, if I wasn't tracking with them with that emotion and that animation, they may have felt a little bit less engagement from me. And so what I've really tried to think about as I engage with different people and connect with them is what type of level of animation or energy do I need to show so that they feel like they're being heard and that we really are on the same page. So it's not maybe a normal tendency for me being the green, not to label the green, but it was definitely something that I had to step back and think that, for me, what I was thinking, it was very emotional and very excited, wasn't really hitting the mark to what a yellow might be looking for. So.
Yes, and a couple of things if you can talk about, Lisa. One of them is which I always find really interesting is when we look at sometimes when we're in our, you hear the term backup style. So
Mhm.
let's say our predominant energy is, and our traits tend to be in yellow, but when we're under stress, we may have some of those tendencies that you talked about, but we actually may move more into the yellow, into blue, green, into red. So can you talk about that a little bit?
Sure. Yeah. Different tools call it like a backup, if you will. There's also, an indication to say that you have a primary style and you have a secondary style. And then depending on what those styles or what those characteristics are, for example, you could have a secondary style that's a red, and even though you may not be coming out as being more visual, like from an extrovert or visual from like an aggressive standpoint, you could have more of a passive red, if you will. So you can still have those characteristics of being
Yes.
very goal oriented. And that's what's important also to think about. We hear the reds, but it's important to keep in mind not to take them personally. So they're motivated, they get their energy from having results, from being goal oriented. So it's really about some of their styles, and not to have us always take their actions as being personal or against us.
It's a great point. And one other question I want to, maybe you can elaborate on. And, one of the assessments insights actually calls it these energies, and I've always liked that term because if we think about that, and this is the beauty of how much we can grow as individuals and diversity. But let's take someone that is let's say they're green blue, and they're also maybe they're a sales leader, so the more where they get their energy, more introverted, but they can still be a very successful sales leader that's up there. But if you can talk about how much energy plays into this, how we use our energy and how we replenish energy based on the colors, I think that would be awesome.
Yeah, no, it's a great point. I think one of the best business partners that I had was a sales executive who was a natural introvert. And he would get up on stage, and you would think that he owned the whole room. And he could become a really, really compelling red, even getting into a little bit of yellow. Now, it took him a lot to prepare to get up to that point. And after his time on stage, he was emotionally and physically drained because it was different than kind of his natural style. But he was a very, very successful, effective sales leader. So he knew how to drive for results. He knew how to command the stage, if you will. He could tap into, he had a huge followership from his sales organization. So there are different times when people have to step up and show a little bit of a different style, if you will, based on what their role calls for. But they find ways, and when you know yourself, you know how to kind of replenish that energy. So if you do get wiped out because you needed to step into a certain mode, you can find ways to kind of recoup. So for example, myself being green and being a little bit more introvert, I like spending time with people. But if I had a day where I was having a lot of one-on-one conversations, that was emotionally draining for me. So what I would do, at night to kind of get my energy back is just you read a good book and spend some time just, myself, for example, and really kind of tapping back into something that was quiet and something more introverted for me. So there's definitely different ways that you can, deal with how do you get your energy to where you need it to be, and then how do you replenish your energy.
Absolutely. And you've given us some really great examples, and as leaders, of even thinking about these different energies. And if you've got a 2-day meeting, how do you accommodate? How do you give people some time? And I always thought we would have these 3 or 4-day meetings, and every night there would be a dinner. And for me, at the end of that, I'm more yellow, but I'm not the extreme of extroverted. So I actually needed some time to myself. But I always thought, and when I planned meetings, to say, give people a night off. So
Yeah.
for those people that need to refuel, give them a chance to do that. But the whole science about maximizing people's energy. So
Mhm.
yeah, but great examples,
Yeah.
Lisa.
The other thing I just wanted to point out before we do leave this, because I like the visual a lot, and it's important, I think, to keep in mind as we look to complement one another. So our natural tendencies and being humans, we want to be with other people that are like us. And I've worked with leaders before who like to hire, if you will, or even like to have that camaraderie with someone who's very similar to their personality style. So for example, there was a leader that I worked with who was red, and he was very excited when he had another team member join his organization that was also red. And it helped him connect. He felt like he could, really work productively with that individual because they were efficient with their time, they were very goal oriented, they got their results, they had their marching orders. And the thing that I would just call out, that can be a very powerful relationship. And the one thing to be kind of that watch out, and for all of us to think about, is our natural tendency is to be with other people that are like us. However, that can also be potential blind spots for us. And if you're in a leadership position, or if you're just trying to work collaboratively with a team or group of people, it's nice to keep this visual of these 4 colors in mind. So for example, if you've got too many reds, then you're going to be, the pie is going to look too red, and you may not be pulling in some of the key characteristics of, that people recognition, and spending some time, having a little bit more patience to kind of work through and hopefully get a better product, because you do have that diversity of thought, you have that diversity of how you might approach things. You can include more of that visionary. You can get a little bit more dynamic. So as you put together teams, or as you think about people that you work with, think about this pie, if you will, and how it is good to have some of the different colors represented.
Absolutely, because you take any piece of that pie,
Mhm.
too much, too much of one pie, right? Is just not optimal. I could almost say that optimum, but when looking at this whole, having different, exposure to these different energies is always going to bring out uh, a better outcome, and to challenge our own thinking, our own perspective, whether it's whatever this energy or the traits are.
Yep, great. Okay, so we've talked about some of the characteristics. We've talked about how they can show up a little bit differently. So now let's talk about the so what. As you think about taking these styles into consideration, and how do you use them to more effectively communicate with others and really start to influence others? So we're going to start off again going through each of the different categories and the different styles here. We're going to start with the red. So we know from our prior conversations here that the red really wants to be clear. They want to be to the point. They want to stick to business. So if you were to have a meeting with a red, it probably wouldn't behoove you to start off asking about their family or making small talk, because they really want to just get down to the business. They want to have the updates. They want to talk about what are the results. You definitely want to come prepared to a meeting or to an interaction that you have with a red. You want to be able to ask specific questions. They don't want to have generalizations. You want to also be able to offer a win-win option, and also make sure that you can refer to the results and support and maintain what their goals and initiatives are. They really want to have the freedom to make their own decision. So it's best to be able to come in and have a discussion with them with some of the recommendations outlined here, but not come in solving something and not having them be a part of that discussion. Some of the key words that would get a red's attention would be words like quick, advantage, decisive. And some of the words that would probably turn them off would be inconsistent, asking them to follow directions or refer to directions, or even using words like patient, because they really are fast paced. They want to keep the momentum going. If you think about the yellow, if we go down to the right hand side on the bottom, again, these individuals are looking for that people interaction. So allow time for some socialization, even to the point of how you schedule meetings. So if there's an opportunity to talk with somebody at the end of the day, if there's an opportunity to squeeze in some extra time so that you can really have more of a catch up with them on a personal level, that's really going to make that conversation go farther. Try to make sure that you're focusing on people, that you're including a people conversation. So yes, they're going to also want the business results, and they're also going to be, goal oriented, but work in the people aspect and work in how people are part of the business or part of the goals. That will go a long way with a yellow. Ask them for their opinion. They want to be involved. They want to be included. Provide ideas so that you can have some brainstorming with them. Be stimulating, be energizing, be fun, and support their intentions. If you have details that are going to be important, have those in writing. Yellow may get very, not so much carried away, but just very excited and very animated and very optimistic. And so you want to make sure that you're capturing things that are going to be key for you to refer to later. They really want to keep the conversation going. So you want to make sure that you're engaging them. Some words that are going to really resonate with a yellow would be flexible, exciting, inspiring. And then some words that'll probably turn them off would be ordinary, quiet, or strict.
And a good thing with people that have the yellow tendencies, sometimes if it's, let's say it's someone that's your manager or someone that reports to you, is to be very clear about what you just decided. Because for someone that has a yellow energy, they may be talking about a lot of things, and the person on the other end is going, "Oh my gosh, I've got all this stuff to do." Where the person never intended that. They're just brainstorming out loud. So a good habit, if you're working with someone that's yellow, you're yellow yourself. And I can tell you this from my experiences, to say, okay, we talked about a lot of things. Let's talk about the three things that need to be, so just so we have clarity, here's the three things we're going to take action on.
Mm-hmm.
So there's could be a helpful tip for you.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Spoken from a true yellow.
Absolutely.
Good tip. Let's move over to the greens. For the green, again, they also are people oriented. They're going to be interested in having you break the ice with them. So again, having some small talk, but showing some sincere interest in what they're doing or how they're doing. As we mentioned earlier, Denise pointed out that, the greens might be in that group and they may be a little bit reserved, or they may be a little bit quiet. So patiently draw out information from them, because they usually are processing information, and when they have something to say, 9 times out of 10 it's going to be valuable or really thought out and contributing to that team or that discussion. But they probably won't be the first person to raise their hand or jump in to contribute. So really think about how you can include them and pull them into the conversation. Have a logical approach. Make sure that you're effectively listening to them, not just listening to them, but really understanding what they're saying and being effective listener. Allow time for them to process information. They're not going to be best if you come to them and ask them quickly to make a decision, because they're going to want to think through and really have time to consider and process the information. They are looking for, and they usually are reserved but deliberate, and they would like to have non-confrontational type environments. Some of the words that are going to catch with a green would be consistent, usual, secure. Some of the words that'll probably turn them off would be unexpected, urgent, or anything that is confrontational. And if we swing up to the top left-hand side, we're going to close this out with a blue. So a blue, as we mentioned before, is that data-driven person. You definitely want to prepare in advance when you're going to be meeting or interacting with a blue. Also be straightforward, be thoughtful, provide specifics, and have backup. So you have your data covered, your facts covered, and have an action plan. Make sure that you're allowing them their space. They also want to process information, not make really quick, rash decisions, but being able to have some time to think and process. When they're looking for facts and data, just keep that in mind. So if you're emailing them, if you're inviting them to meetings, if you're giving them materials, really call out that type of information. You don't need to use a lot of fluff around it. They really just want the facts and the data. Some words that would really be catching the attention of a blue would be factual, precise, or verified. And then some words that would probably turn them off or really not get their attention would be imagine, or something that's experimental, or educated guess, because they want those facts. So these are
great explanations, Lisa. And they move into, say you have a meeting with someone where a decision needs to be made, and so for the blue and green, it may be really helpful actually to share your deck ahead of time, with the data in the background, as a backup, because you may be able to go to the red or yellow and say, okay, this is the background, and you get through it. Especially, if you've got a track record with those individuals, they may be able to go ahead and make that decision. But, if you look at, for people that really want to go into those details, giving them a chance to do that will serve them well, and in turn serve you well.
Yeah, great point. And also call out, what are you looking for from them too? So
Yes.
Give them the information in advance, but also call out, green, really looking for your input on X, Y, and Z. So you can be very focused. The other thing you raise a good point too, Denise, when you think about, in an office environment and somebody doing a drive-by. So, people can have kind of that open door policy, and you can stop by and have a conversation with them. Reds, probably you still want to stick to what the business is, but a yellow would certainly welcome you stopping in to see how they're doing, having a conversation. A green or a blue, if you stop in, it's not going to be a quick decision that they're going to be able to provide you with. So not only preparing for meetings, but just thinking about how you interact with somebody, and again, trying to avoid or make the best use of what that drive-by might be.
Absolutely. In the questions that you might ask, what other
Mhm.
information do you need, to make a decision? Just asking that of saying, I think we've prepared the business case. Do you need other information? And asking that, you may easily get no, yes, whatever, but just clarifying.
Yep, great point. Great point. So I think the bottom line here, and a couple of really key takeaways that I think are important to consider, is first of all and foremost to really be genuine. So it's important that that you ease into this if this is new for you. But really, the bottom line is to become aware, because once you can be aware of something, then you can have the appropriate accommodation. You can adapt accordingly to what you need to. But it's really about being genuine. I had a situation in the past where I worked for someone who was very knowledgeable about this and how they needed to connect with people. And one day when I went to go to a meeting with them, they were referring to their list of information that they had on people so that they could talk about what your kids were doing or what they were up to, what your partner's name was. And he was literally reading from his phone, trying to catch up with me. And so not to mock anybody's mechanism for that, because we all have, different ways that we try to remember people's names or remember information about them. But the way that he delivered it, his body language, his nonverbals, and the fact that he was reading from his phone, it didn't come across as being genuine. And so really think about, how are you trying to connect with that person, and make sure that it works for you and that it's going to tap into the right thing for them.
And another terrific example, because something that, is so close and near and dear to you, that when someone is putting that out there, it's really offensive. It
Mhm.
goes beyond being authentic, because it feels like, that those things, how important are those, where, that's your everything. So, that example you gave is a really powerful one of, you can't fake caring.
Yep. No, no, great point. Because that's how it landed with me, that it
Yes.
really wasn't worth trying to make the effort. So great point. The other thing that I would just call out is just, we've talked about it and we've mentioned it throughout this discussion, but just really knowing your audience. So thinking about in advance, if it's a one-on-one meeting, if it's a team meeting that you have, if it's a presentation that you're doing, think about how you can try to connect with some of the key decision makers, or even during that one-on-one, what's going to be important for you to come, and how can you better effectively communicate with those individuals. So if you're at a group meeting, recognize if you've got Joe there who tends to be more of the blue style, and recognize that he may need more data and facts. You can talk to him later. If you have a yellow there, try to be more visionary. Try to acknowledge some of the people questions that they might want to be tuned into. But really recognize who your audience is, and really try to avoid a personal agenda. I've worked with individuals before who've been brilliant from a science and a technology standpoint, and they have been so passionate about the work because they spend so much time on it. It's so important to them. And I've been in meetings where they have literally, referred to the study and given the minute details of how many patients and what's happening, and they really have effectively disengaged almost the entire room. And they're not tapping into, what are the results. They're not tapping into, what's the next steps, and what are some of the things that are going to be important, from the impact of the study, for example, and things that they can really be a true leader about. So I would just caution you, and just keep in mind that check yourself to make sure that you're not getting so strong about your personal agenda that you're ignoring some of the other personality styles and how you can connect with them.
Good point.
Okay. So Denise, I think that we had some questions
Yes.
that had come up, so maybe we can go through. I have a couple of those
Yeah, that
jotted
sounds
down here.
great. Great, Lisa.
The first one was a question about, how does culture affect personality styles? So given different organizations, knowing what the culture may be and what it isn't, how do you adapt to, or how do you learn about a personality style? And I think this is a great question and a great call out, because we do know that some cultures are very, very strong, and some can be positive cultures, and some can be almost toxic cultures.
Yes.
And it does definitely have an impact. And what I would just caution is, we don't want to assume with all of these personality styles. It's really about some general characteristics. And especially if you're dealing with someone recognize what the culture might be of the organization that you're part of, and give the person the benefit of the doubt. If they're showing up and trying to match the company culture, that may not be who they really are. There's different tools that can actually look at what is your natural self and then what's your adapted self. And so how much do you adapt to the environment versus really being your true self? And so it's important with some cultures, especially if it is a more toxic culture, that person, may not be showing up and kind of what their true personality is. So make some extra observations, take some time to get to know them and figure out some more of the clues versus jumping to conclusions that they may be really a representation of the culture.
Absolutely. And your point, and I think we talked about this in one of the other sessions about being authentic, of that when it appears that we're not authentic, it really detracts from trust. Mm-hmm. And so when people find themselves in a culture, in a situation, maybe, it's temporary, whatever it may be, and it doesn't feel authentic, it doesn't feel genuine, then, the walls are going to be up for most people. And, I think we received a question about, something similar to that, right? Where you've got an environment, it feels toxic. People seem to be operating in the same way. And that may be just built on a lack of trust. And so people are putting the minimum energy, maybe it's a backup energy out there, which is not healthy for anyone.
Mm-hmm. Yep, no, definitely. Another question that came in was just about how do you label people? So we've talked a little bit about the reference to the red, green, yellow, and blue.
Yes.
And then what are some of the downsides to labeling? And I think it's important to call out that this isn't intended to be establishing a label. So we don't want to create bias. We don't want to put people in a category, because none of us want to be categorized. And as we mentioned at the beginning of the session, it's really about all of us have some parts of these different personality styles. And so it's more about what is our primary and what are some of our preferences.
And what task are we called on to accomplish? So let's say we're yellow, but we have to get something done that's very detail oriented. Mm-hmm. You could still get it done, right? Or you're blue and you have to be in more of a driver mode. You absolutely can do that. So also don't shortchange yourself, right? Because we can say, well, gosh, I'm more this, I'm more that. You could be all of these things. Mm-hmm. It might take more energy, but certainly you can flex to do that.
Yeah, great point. So the other one I think that's really relevant is we talk about a question that came up with interviewing. So there was an individual who had gone on an interview, went through the STAR process. So they gave the situations, they talked about some of their results and what they had contributed to. And they were wondering about connecting with the personality styles of the interviewer. And some of the feedback that they had gotten was that they were probably too much of a storyteller. So again, I'm paraphrasing the question, but I think that this is relevant for people to think about. It's still a good practice to go through the STAR methodology. And one of the things that you can definitely do is, even in a meeting, I don't think we talked about it specifically yet, but if you're in a meeting, if it's an interview or if it's just a regular business meeting, if you need to pause and kind of put a stop to the conversation, just so you can reflect and make sure that you're engaging and that you're tracking with the person, that's certainly appropriate to do. Now, there's different ways to go about it, but even in an interview process, you can get a sense, as you're describing one of your STAR situations, you can get a sense and even pause and ask the interviewer, would you like to have some more detail, or would you like me to expand on that? So that's a good kind of check-in. So you can get a sense of not so much the personality style, but how are you connecting with, how do you need to demonstrate yourself during the interview process? So there's a little bit of a difference of not trying to always gauge what the interview style is, because hopefully if it's a good interview, they're going through some standard questions, they're getting a sense of what do they need to ask and learn about you. But there's definitely appropriate times for you to pause and make sure that you're connecting and give that audience, regardless of how big it is, the information that they need.
Very good. And, one of the other things too, you brought up the topic of pause. And when we look at, different personality styles, they may feel very comfortable with the pause and others don't. I have just a real quick example. I worked with someone who I would say was probably, quite analytical, more the blue tendencies, blue red. And the person was masterful at this pause, like you'd be talking and then they would genuinely be reflecting. And so, when I'm in like my yellow energy, I'm like, okay, well, I better fill that. I better fill that up because it seems like a big hole and it must be my responsibility to fill it. And so for just making stuff up to talk about it. And then at some point I got the feedback like, hey, Denise, you may want to stay more focused. And I thought, if you only knew like how much I was working to fill in this, what seemed to me like, 15 minutes where it really wasn't. And so I learned from that example, when someone, is pausing and they're thinking about something, don't jump in and think you're saving the day, right? I had to save myself by letting that person just be them.
Yeah, no, great point. That pause can be dangerous.
I was filling it in with, hey, have you seen about those Cubs? I mean, nothing even related. I didn't even know what to say. So it was a very, very good, but very painful lesson for me.
Good point. Another question is, how do you get a sense of what somebody's personality style is if you've just met them for the first time? So if you don't have the luxury of working with them or having known them for a while. And there's, I think, a couple different ways that you can go about this. So one of them is really that person you're meeting for the first time. Now, hopefully you have the benefit of them introducing themselves, so sharing a little bit about themselves, or you might have the opportunity to even ask them, can you provide, some information? We'd like to learn about you. So picking up on some of the clues that that person might give you, as far as whether or not they talk about their family, what are some of the things that kind of come off their tongue first, what's business that they might talk about, or just some of the things that might be important to them. So a little bit of the context clues that they talk about. Some of the body language you can also take a look at. If it is more of the yellow, they're going to be a little bit more open. They're going to use their hands. They're going to be a little bit more expressionist. If it's more of the blue, they're going to be a little bit more reserved, maybe a little bit held back. Now, given the individual and given maybe even the role in the organization, they may be more polished in this area, or they may be more experienced and be able to really explain themselves or talk about themselves, so they hit kind of the main areas. But if you have an opportunity, definitely try to learn more about the person, or just pay attention to some of their nonverbals as well as the things that they're talking about. And then if it's not somebody that you're meeting brand new for the first time, but it is still somebody new to you, take a look at or just observe some of the interactions that you had with them. So if it's somebody that you're part of a team that's been pulled together, an ad hoc team, and you're starting to meet some new members, pay attention to what they're doing, what they are saying, how they approach some things, and see if you can get a sense of their personality style too. Again, this isn't intended to be an exhaustive list of all the different areas or characteristics, but it's intended to just increase your awareness. And part of increasing your awareness is just truly being aware of it and starting to observe some of the way that others are interacting and how their primary style might be coming through. But Denise, do you have any other tips or experience that you would share for that too?
No, I think you've covered that. Great job with that, Lisa.
Okay. I think that the last question then that we had was just around how do you choose an assessment? And there are a variety out there. Many of them you can find out information on the internet. You can learn about what the tool is itself. You can learn about the background. You can learn about the validity of it. Really, it depends on what your purpose is. So there's several that are great for individual purposes. Many of them can be applied to a team concept. So it's really about what do you want to get out of it and what's important. One of the things that we're looking at with availability and options at the mentoring place is some tools that might be available for people to take a look at. So whether it is everything DISC, or whether it's related to Hogan, or something that might even be TTI related, just having options for people so you can learn about it and see if this might be something that might be beneficial to you. But the main thing that I would just recommend is that you do inquire about it and really get a sense of what does it look like? What is the sample report? And most of them are certainly willing to share how the research that they do, the ongoing research, the statistical significance, the validity, just so you can get a comfort level that it is something legit that's out there.
Yeah, it's really terrific, and the idea of like, should I take an assessment? Should I whatever? I'm a huge proponent of being a student of people, because in that learning, we learn about ourselves, we learn how to, get along better with other people. And that extends, as you said earlier, well beyond the workplace. And I think of some assessments that I took, geez, probably 15, 18 years ago, and I'm still using, those tips and techniques, and, making them more effective, with just continuous learning. Lisa, you've been absolutely incredible, and this has been so helpful and insightful, practical, giving us real tools. Again, those things that we can put in the toolbox to make us more effective and to help us achieve, as we say at the mentoring place, our bodacious goals. And whatever those are, those goals don't have to be about, hey, I want to be the highest this, or they may be. Whatever it is to you, we want you to do it incredibly well, and to be happy in the pursuit of those goals. So Lisa, thank you again. And to everyone that's tuned in, thank you, whether you've listened live or you're watching on demand. We have so much more to come. Really exciting speakers. Next up on the mentoring place is a good friend of mine, and I've known her for a number of years, and she is a phenomenal senior leader. Her name is Michelle Carnahan, and she is at Sanofi. She runs a very large business from a P&L standpoint, exceptional leader. And what I really like about, well, there's a lot of things I like about Michelle, but you know what? Not only tremendous leadership, she's a change agent, and she has just huge passion and heart. And I like it that she's no nonsense. She's going to tell it the way it is. And I can promise you great insights and lots of fun. So in the process. So I hope everyone has a wonderful rest of the day, a great weekend. Thanks so much for tuning in. Lots more to come with the mentoring place, and we sure look forward to it. Bye-bye.